Well, good morning, everybody. Actually, it's noon here in Houston, so good day to everyone. Today is our last mission management team press briefing. The mission management team met earlier this morning, and joining us for the briefing today is Leroy Kane. He's the Deputy Manager of the Space Shuttle Program. He's also the Chair of the MMT, and also joining us is Mike Suffredini. He is the Program Manager for the International Space Station, and we'll hear from both gentlemen, of course, and then we'll take questions here and at other NASA centers, and I'll start with Leroy.
Okay, good afternoon. Thanks, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. It's a great day in space again for us, and we'll get to some of those details in a little bit. I want to start out by congratulating the entire Space Shuttle Program team. It's been a long haul for us, and a couple of years ago we challenged this team to get to this point, and the many milestones in between then and now, and they have been outstanding in every way that I can think of. They have been dedicated, committed. They come into work every day, day in and day out, knowing that eventually we will have our final shuttle mission. And I want to tell you that they have treated this mission no different than any other one. And as I've said before, they have been dedicated and committed to ensuring that this final flight would be as successful and as safe as any that we had previously flown. And so far, that's certainly been the case. So the team is the finest team, I think, in the world in terms of their capabilities and their professionalism, and they have a lot to be proud of in terms of the many accomplishments of the Space Shuttle. Of course, the team that is in place right now is not the team that's been in place for 30 years. We are undoubtedly standing on the shoulders of many giants who stood on shoulders of giants before them, going all the way back to the very beginnings of human space flight. So for our part in that endeavor, I'm very proud of this team, and they should be proud also. They've done a fantastic job, and of course we have this mission to complete. But certainly for the docked mission, it was a huge success, and between Mike and I, we'll probably talk a little bit more about that as we go on through the day today. The other thing I'd like to do is thank the Space Station Program and Mike's team, and congratulate them on their efforts in terms of the missions that we've worked together. I couldn't be more happy with the way the team worked together, the team being the combined shuttle station team. It's just a marvelous thing to watch and to be a part of, and to have the orbiting outposts that we have in orbit today, obviously enabled by the space shuttle, arguably probably not possible without the efforts of the space shuttle system and the team that has worked on the space shuttle over the years, is truly an amazing engineering feat. And the thing that strikes me as much as the engineering feat, when you think about all the hardware that's on orbit, when you think about the fact that it's man-tended 24/7 and has been for a number of years and will be into the future, performing world-class science and research, that in and of itself is pretty astounding. But the thing that strikes me and that I think will probably be as important historically many years from now when we look back is the spirit of cooperation and international partnership that these folks have fostered over the years. And I think they can proudly hold that up as a model for everyone to try to achieve in other facets of our life here on Earth. So I've been very impressed by that. I didn't know much about it when I first started working in the shuttle program. I have come to know a great deal more about it in terms of our workings with the space station program during space station assembly. And I've been very impressed and continue to be impressed by what they have been able to accomplish in that regard. And I think the folks responsible for that, as I said, the hardware is incredible, and the systems are incredible, and the capability is incredible. The people even go beyond that in terms of what they've been able to accomplish. So it's a pretty amazing thing to be a part of this team, and so I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about it. As far as this mission and the mission management team, we did meet today. The main topic of our discussion today, of course, was the entry summary and the entry briefing by the entry flight director. And it's pretty straightforward. Our planned end of mission day is Thursday. The first opportunity is early in the morning on Thursday with a 5:56 Eastern time landing time, just about 40 minutes before sunrise. We do have a couple of opportunities on that day. In broad terms, the weather looks very good from a forecasting standpoint, so it looks like we have a very good chance to get into KSC on Thursday, assuming all of the systems and the weather continues to cooperate. We're not working any issues. We don't have any significant anomalies. The Atlantis performance has just been outstanding this entire mission, and that continues through the briefing I got today. The crew did complete all of the late inspection, as we call it, late inspection activities for the thermal protection system. All of that data, at least with the exception of about 24 minutes of a time block of about 24 minutes of data, was on the ground by the time we completed the mission management team this morning. And so by now that data is probably also on the ground, and the teams will go over all that data and review it and analyze it as we always do, and I anticipate no issues in that regard. We will have an MMT tomorrow morning, and we'll review any final data that's available at that time. And so the crew is doing great. They've performed outstanding on this mission. The team on the ground has been right there with them all the way along. We've had what I consider to be a very successful docked mission, and Mike will comment more on that, I'm sure. But in summary, it's gone very well up to this point, as well as I could have ever expected, anticipated, and hoped for. So we're very pleased to be at this point, and we're focused now on getting Atlantis and the crew back, and we'll worry about the other things once we get wheel stop on Atlantis and we get Fergie and his crew out and greet them on the runway, and we look forward to that on Thursday morning. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Well, good afternoon. I'm not sure I could say it any better than Leroy. It's obviously been a wonderful ride throughout the assembly of the ISS, and it's only befitting that on the very last flight to ISS, the mission went much better than we had hoped. We've got the extra day. We had thought we'd be in about the 70% range on the MPLM in terms of return. As you know, it flew up pretty full, but we ended up at 96% by volume on the MPLM, which means that many of the ORUs we weren't sure we would be able to get to and get stored into the MPLM, and some of them that needed work during the docked period in order to get them removed and installed into the MPLM. All that work had to be done. The extra day, plus just the outstanding effort of the combined crew and the operations team on the ground made it possible to get everything that we wanted to get home in the MPLM. All the work we had on our books as forward work that we had to do after the shuttle left, just because we didn't have enough time, largely was performed, and the shuttle crew left us with a very clean vehicle. And in fact, what our plan is now, as I've told you before, we're turning our attention to utilization and dedicating a certain number of hours for utilization. The plan is to dedicate 35 hours a week. And let's see, this is week 18. So on week 20, we go to that process where we obligate the hours to research, and then we figure out how to do all the other operations and maintenance tasks we have to do with what is left. And so I think it's a wonderful position we've been put in by the Space Shuttle Atlantis, and we think it's a great tribute. Leroy has said, and I'll borrow this phrase from him, he said the ISS is the legacy of the shuttle, and I think that's very true. And so our job is to keep that legacy alive as we utilize ISS. I told the team yesterday after our last ISS mission management team meeting that we had to keep in mind that the assembly has been a great ride. It's been 13 years, 35 shuttle flights, an enormous number of other Soyuz in progress and ATVs and HTV flights to get us to this point. But this point was not the end. This was, in fact, the means to an end. So we've assembled this vehicle, and now it's our job to utilize it. It's going to be the cornerstone to exploration for this country and for our planet. It's going to be the way we foster commercialization of low Earth orbit. It's going to result in research that's going to benefit humanity and our planet. The things we're going to learn from ISS we just don't even know today, and in some cases don't even fathom yet. But we've built this tremendous vehicle. It could have only been built with shuttle way back when. That was what the design assumed. And so once you were into the design, we really were at a point where without shuttle we couldn't have built it. And so I think it's appropriate at this point that we look to the shuttle and to the program that operated her in such fine fashion, and be proud as a country of what we have done, and look to ISS, the utilization, the complete utilization of ISS as our way to be proud of our accomplishments with the shuttle program and show that what she stood for is going to have many, many years of a contribution to not only our country and to our pride, but to the world at large. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Leroy. Okay, we'll take questions here in Houston as usual, and then we'll go to the other NASA centers if there are questions. So if anybody has a question, just head on. Clara, you can go first. You're closest.
Question for Mike Seferdini. And I'm wondering, the space station is considered officially complete. When exactly did that happen, and what was the final piece that made it complete?
So that's an interesting question. A few years ago, we did have a stake in the ground we called assembly complete, and we went through a period probably about six or 7 years ago, where we started talking about core complete, and we sort of changed. It was all based on when the shuttle was going to retire, and so we kind of got away from assembly complete as being a point in time. We have put all of the planned U.S. modules on orbit. Our Russian colleagues that we know of today, our Russian colleagues are considering, are building actually a multi-purpose laboratory module that's supposed to fly up at the end of 2012. They are contemplating some other modules. There is an experiment being considered, an inflatable module as an experiment that'll come to ISS. So I would tell you, for now, as we look at it, we look at station in terms of, okay, we've built the infrastructure to go do the research we set out to do, and that largely was complete even prior to installing the permanent module that we put up on ULF-5. But we started kind of talking about assembly complete after ULF-5 when that last module went up for the USOS. But I want to say the objective of ISS, though, is to perform any number of research based on what we need to do for fundamental research and what national labs might find to use it as it wants to use the ISS. It's our test bed for exploration. It's going to help us with commercialization. And so from the standpoint of saying ISS looks a certain way and has certain interfaces, we want to remain flexible to make sure that as other people think of uses for ISS, that we want to be able to evolve to be able to support those. So today I don't think of it as much as assembly complete as we have the basic infrastructure, and we might add something here or there based on the needs, and that's the way it should be.
Just quick follow-up. Also, you said you're hoping to move toward 35 hours a week of utilization. Can you compare that with about how many hours a week currently and in the past few years have been devoted to that?
We've been anywhere from 0 to 10 to 20. We went through a really challenging period the last few flights. We really thought we were going to be challenged right prior to ULF-7, and the team really scraped and clawed and postponed some work, and in fact looked at our requirements and reduced some of our preventative maintenance, and we managed to get to about 20 hours a week. So I would tell you that on average probably 20-ish hours, maybe less. So this is a significant increase to the community.
Mark.
Thank you, Mark Haro, for Aviation Week. And I have a couple questions. I think they're for Mike Saffredini. The research hours you're mentioning, are those for NASA-sponsored work, or do you see more than that for national lab activity? I just want to make sure I understand your bookkeeping.
When we talk about research, so the way the ISS is set up, and this is just the way the Russians were brought into the partnership, we said our Russian colleagues would have 3 crew, and with their 3 crew, they'd operate their segments, and what was left, they'd do their research with. And then the U.S., OS, as we refer to it, is with the rest of the partners, and we share that time amongst ourselves. So the 35 hours that I refer to is shared amongst the partners based on their % contribution. Now that's assuming 3 crew. The design of ISS will support 4 crew, and so when we get a new vehicle that comes to ISS, our requirements have stated that we want them to be able to carry 4 crew, and so we'll get up eventually to the 4 crew level we expect, and we'll add all that time to research as well.
Thanks. And I was wondering about the flyover or fly around this morning. From what you could see, admittedly from afar, did you get some of the vantage points that you think will be valuable to engineering, and sort of what would you like to get out of that would help sustain the station over the years? Well,
you know, we think of the fly around as a photo op, and it is. It's a great photo op. But we also, and this is what you can't see, and I won't know till we downlink the images, and a lot of the images we'll get after landing. But they have use the 400 millimeter lens on the 35 millimeter camera, and they take pictures. And what we were looking for in this fly around was we rarely get shots of the end of the trusses. So we presented the end of the truss to the orbiter, and it did its normal fly around and got both ends of the truss, and that's the angle we don't normally get from that vantage point. We've got a little bit of it with the fly around the Soyuz did for us during STS 134. We got one end of the truss. I'll admit that was mostly a photo op, and so we didn't get as many good shots. If you remember now, the orbiter's got all these windows, and so there's more than one person taking pictures. When Paolo did that for us, he had to use a video camera for some of it, and he had to get his lens out and take shots, so we didn't have as many opportunities. But when we have the orbiter and it can have a number of cameras available to take the pictures, then we can get these close-in shots with the camera. So today, from the video images, some of them that I've seen, it looks like we got this great vantage point, but the images I haven't seen yet. They may be downlinked and I just haven't seen them. But that's what we'll go look at. And when we get these pictures down, we've learned quite a bit. It has very good resolution, and we can see small. We found small pinhole, not pinhole, but small 1/8 inch holes in the radiators and things like this that you just don't normally see. So I would expect that we'll get good images, and we'll see what it tells us about the condition of the vehicle.
Robert.
Hi, Robert Perlman with CollectSpace.com. With 2 questions, one for each of you, one looking back, one looking forward. Leroy, you mentioned standing on the shoulders of giants, and a couple of days ago, or yesterday, the crew showed a space shuttle model that they were leaving on board as a monument to the shuttle program that I believe was signed by you, among other people, as modern-day titans, as they called. What did it mean to you personally to be a part of that monument, and what do you think that monument stands for on the station?
Well, Robert, it's an honor for me to have had an opportunity to take part in that. The shuttle that you're referring to, our program manager, John Shannon, and myself, and some of our other managers and senior folks in the program, Fergie asked us to sign it, and he wanted to carry it on board and leave that as a tribute for the space station crew. And that's a huge honor that he asked, and it's a huge honor that they left the shuttle on station right there by the hatch to PMA2. For my part, I like to believe that it's a representation of the entire team, and in fact, for me personally, that's exactly what it is. Obviously, it's not feasible for us to have a shuttle model that would be physically possible for everyone to sign, or we would have done that. And that is what we would have preferred to do, of course, because what you don't see are the thousands of people behind the scenes. And those folks are the ones that deserve the credit. Those folks are the ones that deserve mention. And that's precisely why I mentioned at the outset what's most important for me as I sit here today is I really want to congratulate the entire team. And I'm excited about the momentum that this team has. I'm excited about the opportunity that we have as we wind down shuttle, and we have the ability to seed this team out into the space community and really make every other thing that we're doing as an agency, both inside and outside the gates of the agency, I think better for it. And so I'm excited about that. The team, I think, should be very proud of what they've been able to accomplish. And if anything, hopefully it's a reminder to folks that we played some part, at least in enabling the assembly of the space station, and our contribution there, for however small it may be for each of us as individuals, it's a great remembrance for that. And so that's what it means to me.
Thanks. And for Michael, looking forward to the next U.S. cargo delivery to the space station, where does the decision lie right now in terms of allowing SpaceX to combine their second and third flights to fly directly to the space station?
We haven't made a final decision, but we're pretty close. As far as technically, can we combine the flights and feel comfortable that you can do the demonstration steps planned for both of the missions in one mission, and get the Delta testing done on the ground to make up for what you may not have gotten on the first demo flight. We're there. Technically we're good. The other part that we had to look at was the assessment of the first flight of the Falcon 9, which we took out, or the last flight of the Falcon 9 that we have worked with SpaceX, and we didn't see anything of large concern there. So we're having some final discussions about the actual flight itself that would occur, we'll call it the combined flight, but the next flight, and there's some secondary payloads on there, or secondary payload on there that they'd like to fly, so that's a factor. So we're having those discussions now, but we'll conclude that here in the next few weeks. But the planning is all assuming that we're flying the next flight to ISS. That's what we'll be doing, and so we're not losing any time with regard to being prepared for that flight. And it's probably in later in November launch date that we'll show for it. That hasn't been finalized yet.
Philip Sloss with NASASpaceflight.com. I guess one for each of you. For Mr. Kane, I don't know whether you're allowed to steal Mr. Sakachi's thunder tomorrow about the entry strategy, but I thought I'd at least give it a shot. Are you just planning on KSE only for the first day?
Can't tell you.
All right.
No, I'm. That's nothing would give me greater pleasure than to steal Tony's thunder. But in all seriousness, we are only going to use Kennedy Space Center on Thursday. That's Tony's plan. He brought that in today to the mission management team, and we approved that plan. And beyond that, he'll have a lot of details for you tomorrow morning to talk about.
Thanks. And then for Mr. Saffredini, you made a presentation to the Augustine panel, I believe it was here a couple of years ago, where you laid out the commercial resupply numbers in terms of, I believe, metric tons for fiscal, I guess through fiscal, or maybe it was calendar year 15. Mm-hmm. How does this flight, the ULF-7 flight, change these first couple of years? I mean, obviously, it's going to help you for this year. How is that going to affect? How is the situation that you're in now going to be affected by that? And then also in terms of, where does what kind of a flight tempo do the commercial resupply providers need to establish in order to get those numbers that you need going out at least fiscal 15?
Yeah, when we talked a couple years ago, and we were talking about how we mitigate the risk once we transition completely to the commercial contract. We had this very discussion about how often do they need to fly, when do they need to be up, and at that time, even back then, we were talking about the possibility another flight would help give us some cushion. And over that period, the commercial flights have moved to the right. So what the shuttle flight brought to us was to sort of, I'll say, fill the gap from when at this point, we should have already been flying. The SpaceX vehicles should have been flying, and we'd be just about to fly the orbital flight. And this is natural for these vehicles. I mean, you're building a brand new spacecraft that not only has to launch, get to low Earth orbit, then it has to, in a very precise way, get to a place in space such that we can grapple it. So it's a very difficult task, and both of these teams started with the new designs. And so where we're at today is there's been movement to the right, but it's movement to the right that you could have predicted, and some of us have. And so what the shuttle gave us was a chance to fill that void that we were hoping that the cargo guys would be providing for. So what we have done is given ourselves the cushion to get all the way through 2012, which means we still have a little leeway with where the schedules are going with the commercial vehicles without putting ourselves at risk of having to reduce the planned work we want to do on board ISS. So that's what it provided. So what does it mean to us? It means now, instead of 2012 being a year of commercial flights, you're probably late 2012 as we start to establish our tempo into early 2013, which means now we have extra, if you will, extra flights, because the tempo that you asked about, according to the contract we signed, was about 3 SpaceX flights a year and 2 orbital flights a year, and that's in addition to the HTV and ATV flights that we would expect to have. And so if you assume that tempo, because our up mass requirements stay the same, then we're going to have some extra up mass on those vehicles, and our options are to, if we have the utilization need, to fly more flights between now and 2015, or talk to them about letting the flight slip a little bit so that we just keep that same tempo. Now, we have not had those discussions with them yet because we're kind of waiting to see when they get started flying. But once we do, we will establish that tempo I told you about, and we'll begin the discussion about, okay, now we have more flights in a more compressed time. How do we want to deal with that up mass?
Anybody else here? Okay, let's see. I've got a couple of folks on the phone bridge. We'll start with Irene. You there, Irene?
Thanks, Kyle. Leroy, I have a couple questions for you to start. First of all, do you have any early look at KSC weather on Thursday?
Yeah, Irene, we had a weather briefing in the mission management team today, and of course it's a 48-hour type forecast. Overall, there are forecast to be a couple of different ceilings, mostly few or scattered clouds, nothing in the way of any coming in close to any flight rule violations. The winds are generally in the 5 to 6 to 8 knot range, so for a couple of days in a row. So we have what looks, at least at this point, to be a very, very good forecast. And of course, saying that, again, it is a 48-hour forecast for the east coast of Florida. So, but for now, it looks very good.
Thanks. I thought it was Mike who was talking about photo ops, but was there any consideration at all, or is there any consideration at all to waiving off that first landing, the first landing opportunity, so this last shuttle can land in daylight?
In short, no. We want to stick with what we do normally in terms of our processes and procedures, Irene, and I think it's important for us to do that. I think whether it's 40 minutes before sunrise or an hour after sunrise, it'll be a good landing at Kennedy Space Center, and I think folks will will be very happy to see Atlantis return there. So we're going to stick with our plan. It's kind of a good entry flight team and entry flight director mantra to not pass up a good opportunity. That just is generally not what we want to do in this business, so we don't have any plans to do that.
And I know you're a steely-eyed missile man, but I was wondering if what you were thinking about when you watched that really beautiful television image of the view of Atlantis from the space station flying around. And I guess also especially, that William Shatner thing's been playing 500 times a day, and there's some very poignant scenes of you as the flight director, of course, for Columbia. And if I'm just wondering if that's what your thoughts are as this program wraps up, especially in light of, an alternative ending. Thanks.
Yeah, the William Shatner program is excellent. I've watched it myself. I highly recommend it. It's good for all ages, of course. And frankly, as I watched it, it kind of reminded me, going way back to the beginnings of shuttle, and it takes you through the various eras, if you will, of the shuttle program, and the highs and lows, and the tributes and triumphs. And of course, we remember all those things, those of us that have been around working in the program on some level, but you don't think about those things day in and day out. We think about the things and we focus on the things that are right in front of us as it pertains to getting ready to execute the very next mission, and planning and scheduling and working budget and technical issues. And so it's a good thing to go back and remind yourself because it helps put in perspective kind of in the overall fabric of this program where we fit. And so one of the things that strikes me is that this team that's in place right now, and as I mentioned earlier, we challenged ourselves, we challenged the team to give it everything we had for the final few years here to finish strong, and the team has been very committed and dedicated to doing that. And so for our part, I kind of view us as the anchor, and one of my favorite races is a 4x100 meter relay. Of course, when I ran it, it was 4x100 yards, but at any rate, every person on that team is pretty important. And if you think of the shuttle program as breaking it up into 4 roughly equal segments, this team is kind of the anchor team. And as an anchor, what you really want to do as much as anything is you want to finish strong. When you get the baton, the first thing you have to do is get the baton. And of course, you don't want to drop it because there is nobody behind you, or there's no chance to pick it up after that. And so it's pretty much all rides on you. And the team is really counting on you. The broader team, in this case, folks going all the way back to pre-shuttle, and those folks, again, shoulders of giants that I talked about earlier. So I view this as the anchor team, and in that sense, at least from my view, I couldn't be more proud of the way that they have anchored the space shuttle program. We're not done, obviously, and we won't be done until we get Fergie and the crew on the runway, and as I mentioned earlier, and so we look forward to that. But in that analogy, we're probably only a couple yards from the finish line, and I couldn't be more proud of where we are in that sense. For my part, everybody will deal with this differently, obviously. I would tell you that I don't have any emotions about this, but that wouldn't be true. But I choose to view this more in terms of celebrating what we've been able to do, feeling very good about what we've been able to accomplish. And after we'll stop and after we get Fergie and the crew off the runway, then we'll worry about the other things and talk more about the other things. And I think we can look back and do a lot of reflecting. In the meantime, for me, my choice is to celebrate what we've been able to do, and I think the team can take great pride in that, in whatever part we've had in terms of the shuttle program overall. And that includes, if you want to talk about satellite deploys, if you want to talk about Hubble, if you want to talk about dockings to the Mir, if you want to talk about, of course, construction and assembly of the International Space Station, we can spend a lot of time talking about all of those things. They're all important. They're all part of the overall legacy of the shuttle program from end to end. And folks can be very proud of their part in those things. And so I choose to think of it in those terms. And for now, pretty focused on getting Atlantis and the crew back on Thursday.
Thanks, Leroy. And Mike, I had one question for you as well. Last week, of course, NASA announced the nonprofit that it wants to negotiate to run the national lab portion of ISS. Could you just discuss a little bit about what that entity is free to do as far as funding outside of the $15 million from NASA per year, which doesn't seem like a whole lot? Thanks.
Yes, the $15 million really was more for the nonprofit to operate and perhaps seed a little bit of work. The objective of the nonprofit is to go out there and through, I'll say, educating other communities about what space station can provide to them, help get more, a broader understanding, and therefore more folks interested in utilizing ISS, in investing in research or production on ISS. And so that's really the goal of the NGO. Their objective is to try to marry the money that they're willing to invest into the money that NASA's already invested. And by the money NASA's invested, I mean we have a group of folks within the program that worry about integrating payloads in general, just systems, anything onto the ISS. And so that team exists, and we make them available to do analysis for folks. We define the interfaces for them. If we have facilities on orbit, we make those available. If we already have inserts that are available so they can just put their materials in the inserts, we make those available. We've also, at least in the near term, have some additional upmass to provide to the National Lab providers. So that's the investment that NASA tries to make, and what this NGO is trying to do is go out there and basically find communities, explain to them how this is beneficial to them, and then get them to invest in utilizing the ISS for their own benefit. And so the money that the NGO is off to go get is above the 15 million, which is largely let them operate. So they're going to go out and find investors and find companies that want to that do work on National Lab, marry those two together, introduce them to us, if you will, and then we'll do the job of based on a certain limit of what we can provide for in terms of upmass and volume on board and crew time and whatnot. Then they say, here's the National Lab groups that we want to try to go fly, and then we will work to integrate them and fly them to ISS. Hopefully that made sense.
Marketing and space tourism?
What was the first one? I'm sorry, you were cut off there.
I said, does that include marketing and space tourism and, advertising, basically things that NASA hasn't really been able to do in the past, being a government organization? And, of course, anybody that's wanted to fly on space station has had to go the commercial route through Russia.
Space tourism is not necessarily what we were considering in this effort. Although as the commercial companies start to come forward with their plans to perhaps build systems that they want to fly to ISS, I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't some relationship between the two. Marketing really, I guess it is marketing to a certain sense. It really is talking about there is this capability that is available. And then, so their job at that point is to say, okay, we know this capability exists. It is a very unique capability, and so they have to go out and do what any group that wants to get investors does. They go out and find the investors, and they marry that with the groups that have a need to utilize ISS, but don't have the capital. And that's what this national lab's supposed to do. So to the extent that there's marketing in the sense that they really are the ones that go out there and explain, hey, here's the benefits. That gets you, this grows you the base of folks who go, oh gosh, yes, I could utilize it. And then the next step is to say, okay, now you got the folks that want to utilize it. Rarely do they have all the capital they need, so this group's going to help find then the folks who are willing to invest and help these entities build whatever it is they need in order to come to ISS. And of course, then at that point, it becomes this relationship where we look to see what we have available, what the opportunities are, what we can provide that exists today, and then between all of us together, we get these entities flown and do whatever it is they wanted to utilize ISS for.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Irene. Let's see, James Dean, are you on the line, James?
I am. Thank you, James Dean with Florida Today. Couple questions for Leroy, I think. Leroy, I just wondered if you could give us a sense of the scene at the runway for wheel stop and after. I know you've tried to do everything through the mission kind of by the book, but I'm assuming between sort of special guests and ceremonies for the workforce and stuff that it's not going to be an ordinary landing day. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about kind of who's going to be there, what we're going to see, and how all that's going to be kind of wrapped up with the fact that there's big layoffs coming up this week as well.
Well, I think, James, you'll see, in part, what you've seen typically post-landing in terms of we'll greet the crew. The crew will walk around the vehicle. They won't spend too much time out there. They'll say a few words, and then they'll be on their way. I think what you'll see as much as anything maybe is you may see, you will see a greater number of people depending on when you're looking. Of course, we don't let anybody go out to the runway until the vehicle is safed, and for that part, for those initial stages post-wheel stop, until we get the crew out, until the vehicle is safed, until we do all our sniff checks, all of those things are going to be by the book, and we're not going to deviate from any of those plans. The thing that you'll see that'll be different is there'll be a larger number of people will be allowed to go see Atlantis on the runway after landing. We can't have that large of a group of folks out there while the crew is out there. But for that part, you'll see what looks pretty familiar to you in terms of our greeting the crew and walking around with them a little bit and just briefly discussing the mission and some congratulations and pats on the back and those kind of things if that's what you're referring to. Beyond that, I think after that, once we get Atlantis towed back in the days to come, there will obviously be many. I know there are several planned post-landing, post-wheel stop, splashdown, in the traditional sense kind of celebrations at the various space centers. Kennedy Space Center, I know, Johnson Space Center and Marshall are all doing some events of their own. And so there will be a lot of those kind of activities where people will have a chance to spend some more time together and thanking each other for their contributions. And so I expect there to be a great deal of that. But I don't know that on Thursday morning what you see in that time frame will be all that different than what you have seen before.
Okay, thanks. And I wondered if just for folks who may not have seen a shuttle land before, if they were able to actually see this one, given the early hour and the lighting, I wondered if you could just give a brief primer on kind of help people appreciate what it takes to get an orbiter from Mach 25 down to the ground.
Well, it's a challenge, of course, and all of that energy that we put into the system on launch, when you think about those 7 or so millions of pounds of thrust and our ascent to orbit, and all of that energy and power and velocity that we impart to the vehicle, we have to take all that back out in order to be at wheel stop at the right place and time on the right runway in the end. And so the vehicle has a fairly sophisticated guidance system, and we rely on that in terms of the planned maneuvers and the planned attitude profile for dissipating that energy as the vehicle descends through the thicker part of the atmosphere. And so it's called ranging in the guidance system, And as I said, it's fairly sophisticated, but it's a very tried and true system in terms of being very robust. And so by the time we get to the west coast of Florida or the southern tip of the peninsula, depending on the ground track, we've dissipated the lion's share of that energy. We only take out a couple of % of all of that energy at the very beginning of the deorbit and entry sequence when we do the deorbit burn with the orbital maneuvering system engines. We only take out a couple of % of that overall energy. It slows us down just enough to re-enter the corridor of the atmosphere, precisely the place that we want to, where guidance wants us to begin that journey back to the intended landing site so that we bleed off exactly the right amount of energy. The final moments of that come with a couple of S-turns, as we call them, during entry to bleed off a little bit more energy. And it's a constant iterative process in the algorithm on board where the navigation gets gradually more and more accurate with the various sensors that we have. And so then guidance makes final tweaks in that closed loop system. And flight control responds to that with the thrusters at first, and then a combination of the thrusters and the aero surfaces, and then the aero surfaces alone. And then finally the vehicle pitches over and we get down into the lower parts of the atmosphere and the lower Mach numbers. Cross over land into Florida, and we're entering in the Mach 4 to 5 to 6 range, depending on exactly where over land that we fall on the ground track. Crew would deploy the air data probes at Mach 5, and then that data becomes available anytime after Mach 3.5 when the onboard software deems that it's accurate, correct, and all of the cross checks between the probes are good. That data is important for the flight control system, and so and the navigation system for that matter. And you get about halfway across the state, depending on if you're coming across it broadside or if you're coming up it long ways. And you're entering what we call tame. It's about Mach 2.5, and that's where some of the gains change on the flight control system, and the nose is pitched over even more. And the nose is pointed, in fact, toward waypoint 1, which is a precise point on the guidance circle that basically the vehicle goes wings level and points toward what we call waypoint 1. Those are the final phases of guidance called tame guidance. All of that leads up to the final dissipation of energy, which is around the heading alignment cone. That's the big arc that the vehicle will bank around, and when Fergie takes over manual control, somewhere around Mach 1 or just above Mach 1 before we go subsonic, he'll take over control and he'll fly this very precise maneuver around the heading alignment cone that will dissipate those final amount of energy that will put him exactly on the runway centerline glide slope and with the exact velocity and energy that he needs to make it to the runway threshold, do the final flare, and let the wheels touch down gently on the surface of the runway at Kennedy Space Center. That's basically how that works. That sounds easy probably, but it's taken a lot of folks, a lot of brain power to get us to this point. And of course, it's been a very tried and true system on the shuttle, and it's really a derivative of previous guidance systems for previous vehicles. And so again, on the shoulders of giants. And I hope I've answered your question somewhere in there.
Yeah, thanks. That didn't sound easy at all, and I guess that's what I was trying to get at a little bit, is just sort of how unique the system is, and how nothing else flies like it, and may never again, or at least for quite a while, that we'll see people flying in.
Okay, thanks, James. Does anybody have any wrap up here? Okay, a couple of programming notes. As soon as we're done here, we're going to go back to mission control, and something that the systems engineering and integration team has done for quite a number of flights for the space shuttle program is put together a video of all of the ascent imagery, and that put that to music. That's coming up at the top of the hour, so you'll want to pay close attention to that, and we do have several replays of that coming up as well. The flight day highlights today of undocking all of the fly-around activities is upcoming at 2 o'clock Central, 3 Eastern. The feature that you talked about and you heard Leroy talk about that's narrated by William Shatner is coming up for a replay at 7 p.m., 8 Eastern. The crew gets its wake-up call tonight at 8:59 Central, 9:59 Eastern to begin the cabin stow and all of the day before landing checkouts with the entry team, Tony Sakachi and his team, which will be on console at 9 p.m. to oversee all of that activity. The crew oversees its last series of interviews with all of the networks. That's coming up at 3:54 a.m. Tomorrow, 4:54 Eastern, in the wee hours of the morning. Our last mission status briefing will be back here with Tony Sakachi after he gets off shift tomorrow morning. That's scheduled for 7 a.m., so be sure to tune in for that as well. All of that's in the NASA television schedule. We'll be making a revision to that, so stay tuned for that tonight as well. And with that, I'll thank Leroy, I'll thank Mike, and all of you for coming and tuning in. Appreciate it. And we'll head back to Mission Control and back to space. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Glenda Brown. We're the EVA team for the final shuttle mission, and you're watching NASA TV.